As we come to a point where we might have a COVID-19 China virus vaccine before the election, Trump has been touting the possibility of obtaining this vaccine prior to the election. And suddenly, the Democrats, including Heels Up Harris and Sleepy Joe Biden, are becoming anti vaxxers. This is the Millennial Conservative Podcast. If you guys like my YouTube channel, please feel free to give it a quick subscribe, and please feel free to share it out as often as you'd like. So it says here, according to the New York Post, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris need to quit playing politics with the COVID-19 vaccine. So as we've been going through this COVID pandemic, regardless of how you feel about the situation, there's been a lot of talk about the possibility of getting a vaccine. We've seen Fauci tout the possibility of getting a vaccine, and we've seen Trump pull out all the stops and put operations into overdrive to try to remove the boundaries and the obstacles when it comes to getting this vaccine. And there's been some debate about whether or not it should be mandatory, who should get it, and it's been some pretty healthy debate for the most part. But now that we're coming to the election and the possibility arises that we might see this vaccine prior to election day, the Democrats are starting to run scared. So it says here, are Joe Biden and Kamala Harris trying to prolong the pandemic? And that is the biggest question here. This pandemic, like it or not, has played out quite well for Democrats. The Democrat cities and states have managed to implement massive draconian lockdowns, and they are exploiting this pandemic for all it's worth. And that is part of the reason that one could surmise they don't want a vaccine, at least not before the election, because that will help Trump, and it could help finally put to bed this COVID crisis. Says that might be the result of their reckless efforts to erode confidence in a vaccine, even as they blame President Trump for doing that. Quote, I would want to see what scientists said about any vaccine, Biden huffed Monday. I want full transparency, that is. Don't trust a vaccine okayed by Team Trump. So first of all, this vaccine has nothing to do with being okayed by Team Trump. That is just Biden using rhetoric to scare people from getting the vaccine. You know, the vaccine debate has raged on for quite some time, but the fact of the matter is, if we do end up with a vaccine, there is a good possibility that it could indeed help to stop or at least mitigate this pandemic. Harris was even more blunt. Quote, trust the word of public health experts, but not the president, and insisted those experts won't have the final say. Quote, they will be muzzled, they will be suppressed, they will be sidelined. What an appalling insult to the integrity of Dr. Tony Fauci and others. So they've held Fauci and Birx to up there with the highest regard, and suddenly that regard has kind of gone out the window because we might actually see a vaccine before the election. So it says the anti-Trump media too are playing this game. Quote, scientists worry about political influence over coronavirus vaccine project. The New York Times blared. So they have all the media outlets, all the fake news media outlets going full steam ahead, trying to do whatever they can to downplay this vaccine if it actually does come to market before the election. What will come of sowing such doubt, as Biden himself notes, quote, if we do have a really good vaccine, people are going to be reluctant to take it, though he blames Trump for that despite his own words and Harris. So, and when push comes to shove, people are going to be worried about this vaccine, and even more so than they might already. I'm on the fence. I don't plan on getting the vaccine myself, but at the same time, people that were on the fence and little, skeptical when it comes to vaccines are going to be extremely skeptical if they buy into what is being sold to them by Biden and Harris. So it says, sure, Trump may be trying too hard to lift hopes. His hint that a vaccine might be ready by October on the eve of the election sounds overly wishful. But 9 drug makers have pledged to make safety a top priority. They vowed not to seek emergency approval before trials are complete and to adhere to, quote, high ethical standards and sound scientific principles in producing the vaccine. So, despite what Trump says, despite what Biden and Harris have to say, we should all be able to believe that these drug companies, they're not going to put out something that's going to be detrimental to our health. Could there be side effects? Could there be things that people might take into question about the vaccine like they do any other vaccine? Absolutely. But I don't think they're going to rush a vaccine to market just because Trump said so. This is just another scare tactic by the left, and they are scared out of their minds that this idea of a vaccine coming before the election will drastically hurt the Biden and Harris campaign. So it's not enough to create a vaccine. People have to actually take it to stop the spread of the virus. With anti-vax paranoia a known national problem, it's obscene for Trump's foes to push hysteria. So like it or not, there is a possibility that we might see a vaccine. Wherever you stand on vaccines, obviously that's up to each and every one of us to make that decision. But at the end of the day, you have the Democrats and Biden and Harris running scared because they know that there is a very good possibility that we might see a vaccine before the election.